to turn the floor over now and let each of them introduce themselves, get a little bit of background. We will start with Blood. Blood, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your experience on the server. How you got here.
And formed Retribution, and I did a Slayer, and I'm now best in slot on the Slayer as well. And about 2 months ago, I would say, I took over guild leadership of Retribution as Brutality or Retribution, as some of you may know him, stepped down.
Nice to meet you, bloodbrother.
Well, it's definitely a pleasure having you on here, and definitely looking forward to diving into the topics at hand. And moving on to
There's a slight Discord issue. Tothman is trying to fix that real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Was everyone able to hear me?
Yeah,
I was. Not at first. The stream wasn't. The stream couldn't hear you at first.
Do you want me to start again? Let me know.
Yeah, you may want to repeat yourself, Blood, so everybody has a chance to hear you, because I think the Discord kind of goofed up. My OBS sound setting tweaked itself, so I fixed it. So yeah, if you don't mind, Blood, yeah, go ahead and just reintroduce yourself. I fixed the issue of what it was doing.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so I started as a fresh 40 chopper on Destruction. My first guild was Brutality, so I started at fresh 40 with Brutality. Quickly worked my way up to Officer, and then second in command. Got my chopper to best in slot. And then at about the start of this year, we moved over to Order and formed Retribution, the guild you probably know about today. And played a Slayer. I've just recently got my Slayer to best in slot, like a couple of days ago, got my Triumphant Ring. And probably about 2 months ago, I took over guild leadership of Retribution. So I'm currently the guild leader of Retribution. Brutality, or Steve, as you may know him, stepped down.
Alright, well, again, appreciate you being here, and as I said a minute ago, looking forward to diving into the conversations with you. Moving on, next in line, Rav. Love to hear something about your background, as you're another long-term player in the community.
Yeah, I started on the other side. I started on the Slayer. Played that for, well, basically since game launched until a year and a half ago. And after that, I swapped over to the Destro side. And basically, I main a Magus there. I didn't go the Greensky version. So I play Magus and Chosen mainly, Destro side now. But still consider Slayer the main. So yeah, that's basically me. These days I play mostly like Tosh do solo and small scale, but I have for the first years I was always in warbands and guilds. I've done all of it basically.
I got you. So a lot of experience in the solo area, same as Tosh.
Yeah, the recent years, but yeah, before that I had a lot of experience in the guild and warband side of it as well. Played in what I consider the best guild back then. But when I went back to Return of Reckoning, they had quit the game.
I hear you. Well, definitely look forward to hearing what you'll have to say on the topics that's gonna be being discussed, as you have a lot of knowledge, as do the other people in here. Moving on, Tosh also joining us today, another solo player, heavy Slayer player. Tosh, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon. So yeah, my name is toshutkidup. I've been on the server since late 2016. I started off as a warband player with CNTK originally. I worked up as an officer there. I was there for about a year and a half, 2 years. I started off as an engineer. I then transitioned into a Slayer with CNTK. I left CNTK to go solo in 2018, and ever since then, I've been a mostly solo player that focuses on just open RVR solo roaming. I have recently created a Choppa that I've been working on, also doing him solo as well. So I'm trying to get experience on the Destro side, Choppa side, myself.
Very nice, very nice. Always good to broaden your horizons. And again, looking forward to hearing your viewpoints on various subjects, as I know all of you have very passionate views on different things. And that brings us to our last guest on the show, Mr. bomblingtv, who has been away for a while, is just recently coming back. Mr. Bombling, tell us a little bit about yourself, your experiences and knowledge. Love to hear.
Well, hello Dan, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, Bombling here. I joined Return of Reckoning in 2017 after playing the game also on the live Carignan server. I would categorize myself as a warband player. I care about gameplay and not a single bit about lore. So when I'm talking about the game, it's not including lore at all. I'll let Rav and other people stand for that in debates. You mentioned that my Twitch name is bomblingtv. I am not a streamer by any means. I see myself a little bit as a promoter, mostly back when there was not so much warband gameplay, and I was trying to promote warband play and guild gameplay from Twitch, not to get any benefits myself. I've been part of Fixer's podcast, where I was a little bit of a co-host and potentially also the script writer in the background, but we used Fixer's platform to host the Realm Talk, where we had Fixer hosting, being neutral, and me from order perspective, and Claustro from PNP Guild, and we could debate the same fights, but from two different points of view. As for my classes, I have a ravezaar that is 91, I have a meatball that is 85, and several 80s on both sides. I don't really personally think I belong to any realm or any class. I try to always see the game from how it can be fun for both sides. So that's my own impression of my overview.
I gotcha.
When I'm coming back from Return of Reckoning break and I'm looking at the game, I'm usually picking a side and sticking to it. So I'm playing both sides, but I pick like one side to stick to. As for me as a community member of the server, I've reported an exploit I found where on Meatball you could have two sets on, so you could have both the Warlord set and the Sovereign set at once and have both benefits. I self-reported that and basically lost 60 bonus damage, but it was just not fun having that, so I instantly reported it when I found it. So that's like my approach to fair play.
That's respectable.
And in terms of community efforts, I tried maybe 1 or 2 years ago to collect all the warband/guild leaders and collect quotes from them and give them to the developers or the Return of Reckoning team to give them an overview of how the happiness on the general server was and what people were thinking. And later on, I think that idea turned into being the community management Discord, where they had more direct contact to all the guild leaders. I think that's roughly it. Oh, in terms of feedback I've been part of with Return of Reckoning, I came up with the idea of the weekly Open RVR quest, pips, whatever, rewards. I've been part of Crimson Tunnel testing, and I maybe came up with the Realm Watch idea after a little bit of back and forth with Wargrimnir 2 years ago. So that's
Nice. Very
that's where
interesting.
I'm coming from in terms of my background when I'm going into a debate. That's roughly me.
I got you. Again, appreciate the feedback and very nice to have you on the show, and look forward to hearing your thoughts on the subjects that we'll be discussing. Lastly, there is Karis and myself, which most of you know us by now, but for those that don't, Karis, introduce yourself. He is also resident host of the Realm Watch that goes down every Friday.
Yeah, I was my background is I was a rescue pet found in a dumpster out behind a bar in
Keep
Tijuana.
it serious, please.
Oh, come on, man. Like you said, most people know who I am. I do Realm Watch. I've done videos for years. I made an entire series about playing in scenarios. And I still do videos.
That you do. You do a
I
lot
still
of good
stream.
videos.
I still stream, and my voice is a little off. It's because yesterday was my birthday, and I was, like my son said, I was imbibing a little bit last night, so.
Well, happy birthday. And look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts on the stuff. So, without further ado, I will lay out the much heated topic that was brought up during the last podcast for those that don't know. What happened is a member of the community came forward and laid out the fact that they feel that Rampage is an unfair advantage for Order and that it is biased, and anyone that doesn't understand that is either ignorant or just, as I just said, doesn't understand it, that it's not needed. It's not the true balance between Choppa and Slayer, that the true balance in talents is between Inevitable Doom and Get to the Choppa. That question and that argument that was presented by Vex, I said that I would bring it up at the podcast. I did, and apparently it touched off a much heated debate across the community. To that end, that is where we are at now. So, that is where the conversation will start. To that end, I am going to open it up to bloodbrother can present his arguments for and against, and we will go down through everyone and hear everyone's arguments for and against and have a thorough discussion on that topic and see what everybody thinks. Is everyone good with that, with what I've laid out?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Sure.
Blood Brother, you have the floor.
Okay. So, first of all, I'd preface this by saying I'm not sold that you need to change anything at how things are. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to look at it from the point of view as something is going to change. And if something did change, what should we do? Not that I think that something should be changed. But if you did have to change something, so that point that was brought up about the inevitable doom and the get to the chopper, and the rampage, etc. So I do feel that it's really tricky because you have to go, what's your goal, right? So if your goal is to literally balance the chopper against the Slayer, that's one thing. But it's a whole lot more complicated than that because the Slayer and the chopper fill different roles within Destruction and Order. So the Slayer is much more of a hero class. It sort of operates by itself, and brings a lot to the table by itself, whereas the chopper is it synergizes a lot more with the different classes in the warband. And if you're trying to balance them against each other when they're both in different ecosystems, it's you can break that balance with the other classes in the warband. So for example, so the Slayer is much more of a hero class that can stand on its own, whereas the Chopper integrates, say, with the melee squig herder, and that's like a super powerhouse of a party there. Whereas the Slayer can kind of operate on its own. So when you start taking away various things and swapping things around, that really affects that balance. But with that being said, so I do think that potentially Rampage could be tested to getting rid of it. I think that is something, because Order does have, I would say, a significant advantage in funnel situations. So in keep defenses, things like that, where it's hard for destruction. Not saying they can't do it in any means, but it is harder for destruction to push a Order funnel that's stacked with Slayers that are rampaging and channeling. But in regards to the balance between get to the chopper and ID, yes, they are counterparts in that they're in the same point in the skill trees, but they are very different use cases. So you will see get to the chopper being used a lot in warband play, RVR, whereas ID or Inevitable Doom is very much a it's a niche. It's very good skill, but it's not so much used in warband play because it's point blank melee range. So you'll see it used a lot in scenarios in a single target rotation. But as far as an RVR as a Slayer or a Chopper, you will most likely be at medium range most of the time with your flurry or your lots of chopping. And you won't often be going into melee range because you'll be taking too much damage.
1 second, blood. Apparently an ad hit.
Okay.
It's the one thing I can't control.
They're in ad hell.
Right.
It's the Twitch ads, even though I've done my best to shut them off.
Tosh couldn't shut his off either. So.
I've tried. Twitch keeps overriding it.
Are we back?
Hold on, I'm waiting.
Tough Monroe, while we're waiting for the ad, do you want us to go one by one, or can we comment on each person's feedback afterwards?
After each person is done presenting their argument, each of you can offer your feedback, and then we'll go in turn. That's why I'm extending the podcast like I am, is so that each of you will have a chance to do just that.
Sure.
Yeah, should I go after or?
Are we good?
Yeah, I think you're good.
Yeah, you're good now, blood.
Okay. So yeah, as I was saying, what was I saying?
ID and Warband.
ID
Yes,
Warband.
ID and warband. So ID is very niche in a warband. You can like pop it on a tank in a keep defense and then back off, and they'll explode behind them. But in general, you're not going to be in range to use it in open field play. Whereas get to the chopper is much more usable, and that's pretty much the use case for get to the chopper is in warband open field play. And so as far to the point of the skills balance each other out, I wouldn't say that's the case. So if you were going to make these changes, yes, Rampage possibly you could get rid of, but if you were going to say that ID or Inevitable Doom and get to the chopper balance each other out, that is not the case. I would probably like to see Chopper get Inevitable Doom and Slayer get to the chopper. And so they both have access to both of those tools because they are very different and have very different use cases. So I think that's, if you did go down that route, that's the way I would like to see it happen. But yeah, it's really difficult because the classes, although being mirrors of each other, do fill different roles within the warband, if that makes sense. Or not different roles, they're very similar roles, but they interact with the other classes in very different ways.
Hey,
The Slayer, so it has. I'll pretty much hang on. I'll just link the copy link. I'm gonna paste it in. I just quickly did this the other day. So these are the 3 main abilities between Slayer and Chopper that I think for RVR, Warband and Warband play.
is
I
that
think
you, Blood,
really,
in chat? The hunt?
yeah, that's me.
Hold on, I gotta mod you because I thought I didn't know what your name was.
That's all right.
There you are. Relink it.
Yeah, okay. Paste. Copy. There we go. So I quickly made that the other day. So those are the 3 abilities or tactics or whatever that I think really define Warband and Warband play between the Chopper and the Slayer. That they're really different from each other. So obviously Chopper's got the stabby Gouda tactic, which gives them a lot more crit damage and more burst than the Slayer does. Then Slayer has Rampage, obviously, which bypasses parry and block. Chopper obviously has the chop faster, which makes it integral to a lot of party makeups. Melee Squig Herder needs it to activate them. Shaman needs it. And then Slayer obviously has Shadow Limbs, which is a cooldown increaser for destruction, AoE. And then there's Inevitable Doom and Get to the Chopper. So Get to the Chopper is a kind of it's a really interesting skill because it is fun to use and not fun to play against. The things that make it frustrating to play against, I think, are the fact that it feels random, the people that get killed. It's not, because it's the closest person. So if you're a skilled chopper, you can pick your targets depending on who is closest to you. But I think the general feel of the skill is that when you get pulled in by a chopper, it feels cheap because it feels random. With a Marauder pulling you, it feels a lot. People get annoyed about Marauder as well, but it feels a lot more palatable because they've individually targeted you, and it doesn't feel like, oh, I just luck of the draw got pulled into the blob, right? Whereas a chopper, it feels like they just hit a button and it just pulls in random people, and you just happen to get pulled, and it didn't take any skill to do it. Coupled with the fact that obviously Chopper can pull through walls, pull through rails, pull down through, like, what comes to mind is in High Pass and the tower when you're trying to hold the top BO there, and the Destro's pushing up the stairs, and they can pull your DPS down through the rails down into the stairs. So that's what makes the skill frustrating, and I don't think it's an easy fix is on a dev level to actually fix the skill or fix what's causing the skill to feel cheap. But I do. It's also it's tricky because a lot of the times to get to the chopper is a win more skill. It's not necessarily going to win you fights. It's going to accelerate fights that are already won. So it's not the be all and end all. I just think it gets a lot of flack because it's frustrating to play against because it feels random and it can do annoying things like pull through walls. But I would like to see that Inevitable Doom and Get to the Chopper both get swapped onto the Slayer and the Chopper respectively. I don't know the fine tuning of it all, but if you did make changes, I think that's probably the route that you should go down. In regards to that, and a thing that I will note is not exactly between Chopper and it's not in that debate really, but chop faster for Chopper, I really don't like how that is in the AoE tree, because it really limits creativity with chopper builds because you pretty much have to pick it up. And it kind of can, like, I quite enjoyed running a two-handed single target build for SCs on my chopper. It was fun to play around with, but it was always limited by the fact that I had to give up single target heal debuff because I needed to take chop faster. I think that chop faster would work a lot better in the left tree opposed to the AoE tree because you're always going into the left tree to pick up the heal debuff or even just a base skill for the class, so it doesn't feel like it's a must and therefore detracts from any build craft that you can do. But that's not really between Chopper and Slayer discussion. It's just a little gripe by me.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
You were talking a couple of minutes ago about get to the chopper pulling through walls and different levels. Does the engineer pull, the magnet pull, does that work the same way, I'm assuming?
Bombling, would you? I don't know.
It's yes and no. The thing is, chopper pull is instant, so you can jump and then chopper pull, and you will reach more ground and more area by doing that. Engineer is actually worse than Magus pull because it has 1 second cast time and 1 second delay, whereas Magus Rift is 1 second cast time and no delay. But that's a whole different topic. But yeah, go on, Blood.
I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, I think there's obviously stuff that I would have forgotten, but I think that's kind of my general feelings on the subject. But I'm keen to have discussion with all of you guys and what you think.
All right, I appreciate your feedback on that. Definitely a lot to think about. Rav, you wanted to follow up with some stuff, so I'll open the floor up to you. You can offer some feedback.
That's a good thing. I mean, he pointed out the skills that really differ. The thing, though, if you give get to the chopper to the Slayer, and you give ID to the chopper, fine, I'm good with that. But removing Rampage has a bigger effect because it's the Slayer's way to land hits. You're basically nerfing every other skill the Slayer has that does damage output, including ID. So then, automatically by doing so, Slayer will be weaker than the chopper because that has been calculated in when the game is made. So removing it, I don't think is the correct solution. Nerfing it, yeah, I can see that because at the moment, especially in tight constricted areas, sieges or such, I will consider the Slayer the better class of those two. And I played it, so I mean, people can't say that I'm Destro biased. Slayer is my main, and I will consider that Rampage makes the Slayer better in those situations. But removing it without giving the Slayer something else, yeah, I think it's gonna hurt the Slayer too much. Basically, on every other damage output skill they have. Yeah, there's a solution, but Tosh can take that up later. There's different types of solutions you can do. I would say that the chopper has better group utility than the Slayer has. And I really don't know. Slayer has some working with the Swordmaster, for instance, to reduce cooldowns and all that, make it a better use of its skills. But I still say that the buffs, the shouts from the chopper is just better working for a group than the Slayer is. And Slayer seems just to be a better damage dealer in the fact that it lands more hits. And of course, we all know that the skill that makes that is Rampage. The solution, I really don't know. I mean, devs clearly don't have a solution. We don't really have a solution. They have tried to remove it the once before. I think it was 2016, 17, something like that. And they immediately put it back in after like 1 or 2 weeks. It didn't work. It upset the entire balance of the game. Yeah, so I really don't know. I'm fully aboard with Brute saying that give the pull to Slayer and give the ID or a similar skill like ID to the shotgun. I'm all in favor of that. But I don't think the solution then is to remove Rampage. I think a nerf to Rampage is better. Well, that's what I can say now. We can continue later because I'm guessing this argument is going to go on for a while. So I'll take the next one down the line.
All right, I appreciate your input there, Rav. Tosh, yeah, anything for you to add in on the subject? Anything you'd like to go in on to it, counter argument, or anything you might want to pick apart on it?
Okay. So the argument or discussion between Choppa and Slayer is one that is you can't have as a direct mirror because the two factions, like Blood said, are not created equal when you're talking about warband versus warband play. Yes, Slayer is better when you're looking at pure bypass damage because it is probably the best AoE melee DPS character on the server. That I don't disagree with. My only aspect is that it's that way because Order has one less AoE class when it comes to melee DPS than Destro does. In the sense that Order only has the Slayer, and if a White Lion chooses to spec into AoE or play AoE, he can do that. And that's really about it. The Shadow Warrior cannot really do AoE if it goes into melee form. As far as I know anyway, it doesn't have any real AoE aspects. So the only two options that Order really has when it comes to melee AoE are those two classes. The synergy between Choppa and all of Destro classes is also, in my opinion, far superior than the synergy between Slayer and its Order counterparts.
I agree.
The synergy is much, much better. And the fact that Destro can have the melee Squig Herder AoE, it can have the Choppa AoE, and it can have the Marauder AoE is one reason why I see why Mythic originally made what Blood said, the Slayer, kind of a hero class, to try to help balance that number of disadvantage out. Now, if you were to look at changing Rampage, now as Rav has said, Rampage was removed back in, I want to say 2017, back when Azrael came back into the server, and then it was then, as Rav also said, quickly reintroduced because it was found out that since Order only has really two melee AoE classes, it just doesn't work. And the reason why Destro, in my opinion, complains about Rampage so much is because the makeup of Destro is very tank heavy compared to Order. If Destro had Rampage, I wouldn't say it wouldn't be ineffective, but Order plays a lot more range classes, not tank and melee classes. So it wouldn't be as effective as it is against Destruction. Now, if you were to want to augment Rampage, I would say we could test the theory that actually Zell introduced, and I'm not going to take credit for it, although I would like to, and that is make Rampage only bypass parry and not block. And that way it would kind of force the Destruction tanks to play more sword and board instead of two-handed in warband play. Or have them play more sword and board instead of two-hand. Because then Rampage would be able to bypass the shield. You can only bypass the parry. So that is one aspect where I could see Rampage being adjusted, and to see if that would kind of, I don't know, even the fields when it comes to funnels and things of that nature. However, there again, as Blood said, when it comes to open field combat, the Choppa synergy with the pulls, and just the overall abundance of CC that it seems like Destro has an advantage of over Order when it comes to AoE knockdowns, pulls, snares, slows, knockbacks, things of that nature. It would be a really, I think, really hard thing to try to make work correctly. So I don't know how that would work out, but I would say test it out. Make it only bypass this parry, not block. And then the one big aspect of, if you were to give Choppa an ID ability, I would be against giving the Choppa a direct mirror of ID ability, only because, as Blood also said, when it comes to pure output damage, I find that the Choppa is superior to the Slayer when it comes to pure output damage, generally speaking, because it does have the crit tactic, and most Choppas are able to run a higher crit base rate than Slayers are, generally speaking. So I would be open to a kind of a nerfed version of ID, not a direct mirror of ID. Now, how would you fit that into a Choppa tree? I don't know, because you can't just add a skill without removing a skill. So something would have to be adjusted to make that happen. I would be fundamentally against giving Slayer a get to the Choppa ability. In fact, I would be more of an advocate of getting rid of all pulls, but that's a different conversation. And I would also be okay with moving, going back to Slayer, moving Rampage up the tree. So instead of having it as basically the low-hanging fruit skill, make it higher up the tree, so it's a little bit harder to, let's say, get for everybody. Make it so that you have to be at least around rank 70, so you can have the normal warband meta of Rampage, ID, and
Shattered Limbs.
The Shattered Limbs. Thank you very much, Bombling. I had a brain fart there. So if you move it up the tree, then maybe make it so that not everybody, as soon as you're 40-40, is running the base warband meta. Again, how would you work that out? I don't know, only because if you go up to, let's say, 13 points, 13 points across the board is allocated for damaging abilities and not for utility abilities. So they would be kind of going against, I guess, that internal rule set, I guess. But if you were to do that, I would be okay with it. And then I guess you could move down the ROA ability or Rune of Absorption, which is the single target melee heal. You could move that down, which no Warband Slayer will ever run, and move that down in its place. But again, you're kind of messing with how the trees are set up and defined in their specific roles themselves. So, but again, when you're talking just purely Slayer and Choppa, yes, the Slayer is a better AoE class. But it kind of has to be because it's really half of Order's AoE classes that they have. Whereas the Choppa is more of, like Blood said, more of a synergy class, and it's 1/3 of Destro's potential AoE class. It has the, as he also said, the tactic for speeding up abilities or your auto attack abilities. Slayer has to have a tactic to do that, and only affects himself, not a group. I think the shouts or enchantments that Choppa has is superior to what Slayer offers in a group when it comes to damage output, things of that nature. So it's a balancing question that I don't think you could just say, well, remove this and remove that, and now it's all fixed. Because what you're potentially doing is crippling one side. If you were to remove Rampage completely, crippling one side where it couldn't do anything because Destro is so tank heavy. You can't go into a warband almost anywhere and not see, dozens and dozens of BOs, Chosens, Blackguards, everything. Whereas again on Order, even on Pugs, even on Destro Pugs, they're really tank heavy. Order is just as not. So it wouldn't be the same type of system. Otherwise, Destro could just walk through whatever order it has in place and just walk right and just run him over, and there'd be no stopping him. And I'm done.
I think that's a fair point on that, because even in my limited time since, and I've only been on the server for 4 years, but in that time, even I've seen that about Destro warbands, that they are extremely tank heavy. And it's always been an Achilles heel for a lot of order warbands, pugs included. It's always a struggle having tanks. And I think just about every warband, with the exception of Retribution, every warband I've ever been in, pre-made or otherwise, has been largely ranged heavy.
Your pre-made your pre-made warbands on order side do not run the range meta any longer. There used to be a time where you would run, the Bright Wizard bomb groups, years ago, but that has all died out and gone away. So your pre-made warbands are going to run a very similar setup to what Destro would run, except there's no get to the choppa system. But they are going to run a Slayer heavy group, a White Lion heavy group. But again, it's the only option order really has. There really is no other option.
Bomb Bright Wizards are pretty much in a melee class as well.
It used to be. I don't think it's as strong as it used to be, but that's a different topic in a way. But anyway, go ahead.
I appreciate your thoughts on that, Tosh. I want to open it up now to Bombling to hear his thoughts on it, and then we will have general counter arguments from each of you and see what each of you think, including hearing from Karis, see what his take on things are as well. So Bombling, floor is all yours, man.
Sure, and can I just quickly comment on, you guys came really prepared and you stole all my notes, so my opinions are all what these guys just said. Now, on a more serious note, I do agree with Blood's point, his main point, that Slayer is more of a single superstar selfish hero, whereas the Chopper is more of a group synergy player, as some of the other people already touched on. As for the community idea that we are addressing here, I'm personally very much and strongly against mirroring. I think it's boring. It is making for better balancing because, well, you have the same, so it comes down to playing better, synergy, whatever. But that's not the Warhammer game that I think was meant to be played. I can speak up a little. Is this helping with the volume?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, turning up the volume a little bit and speaking up. Thanks for the feedback. So yeah, lost my train of thoughts. Yeah, Chopper is more of a utility AoE damage dealer. And naturally, the game is not mirrored. That means that it's not only what you have on one realm, but it's also what you're fighting on the other realm that comes into this whole mess of how you're adjusting abilities and all of this. So for me personally, I think that giving a Chopper pool to Order, or a Slayer pool, whatever you want to call it, is a mistake. Just simply because Slayer is fighting Shammies that are kiting and running faster. They're fighting these more tankier melee DPS. The melee Squeak Herder is durable. The Monster Marauder is durable. Like Destro has more of a beefy frontline. You don't really need to pull that in on Order. Whereas on Destro, you're fighting all these ranged classes that have ranged knockdowns, longer range. They can kite a little bit more. So you need this combination of a speed up, but also ability to pull them in when you need to catch them and catch onto them. Order and Destro just have two different ways of engaging, in my opinion. Like Order has the triple pounds setup from 6 vs 6, with the Swordmaster pounds, the Shadow Step, the White Lion. Like suddenly you have 3 high elves on top of a healer, and that's just one way of engaging. Or you have this Bradward White Lion Slayer Warband ball pushing forward, maybe with some Engineer, maybe with some Shadow Warrior, whatever it is. But it's just two different realms that are playing two different ways, and I think mirroring is not helping that format of having two different realm identities. As for these abilities itself, I'm gonna link an image here also. I came a little prepared. So this image is of, let me find it and pull it up myself. I went to the forum and I went through these search words for Get to the Chopper and Inevitable Doom. and these are the patch notes I came to find. I know there's one more patch note, but they didn't either post it from the developers or I simply missed it. That is very likely. So the first one, if people have it pulled up, let me know if you have it pulled up, Tasmana. So the
Yeah,
first one,
I got it pulled up. All I see is get to the chopper.
yeah. So if you click on the first one to enlarge it, so that's patch notes from the end of 2018, and this is chopper pool getting nerfed. It used to be 65 feet, and those of us who played against that back then, now that was a nightmare. Like chopper pool being 65 feet and 40% speed up, like you were guaranteed to get pulled. The version we are fighting against now it's annoying, but I feel like you can kind of see it coming and you can move to the side and let the tanks get pulled. That's just my personal opinion on the matter. So this is a patch notes where chopper pool has been nerfed. The middle one is both Slayer and Chopper, where Reckless Gamble was then scaling with the class mechanic. And here's the big one, and this is a little bit diving into the different abilities, that the dot portion of Inevitable Doom no longer counts as direct damage. That's a big thing, because ID is a monster whenever it's a direct damage, because that means it can proc Reckless Gamble on each tick, it can proc Prayer of Righteousness from Warrior Priest, it can proc Flames of Ruin from a ravezaar, even that one Knight ability, I guess, where you boost the next attack on your next party member. Like, I can't remember the name, but I guess that also procs that. Plus, each crit on ID ticks on the secondary target that is cleaving the damage onto can proc Jagged Edge, and it's just ID is a massive monster in terms of proccing stuff. The way ID also works is if you put it on one target and you have Whispering Wind, so you remove the cooldown on the ability, and you put it on both the DPS you're trying to kill, but also put it on the tank, those two little time bombs will just sit and tick on each other and cleave onto each other, and it's just creating this crazy little duo killing small scale synergy. The third ability, Get to the Chopper. This is the one where they changed the undefendable part. And I'm not sure if this is the exact patch notes where they nerfed. There was a little, I'm not sure if it's an exploit or an unintended mechanic, but choppers could line up so they would double auto-attacking by, I think it was auto-attack, press get to the chopper and then jump, and then they would hit with auto-attack, get to the chopper and then auto-attack, and that would create some sort of like single target burst. That was happening in the beginning of City Sieges. So that was this whole situation where chopper pulls were getting nerfed and adjusted over the years of Return of Reckoning. And the only patch notes I could find was this Rampage little line where it says Rampage will be reverted to the 200 tree, and then 2 weeks later, as Raph also touched on, it was instantly removed back to the version we have now. So Rampage has been adjusted, but only this one time, and it was instantly reverted. So as for the abilities and the history of them getting adjusted on Return of Reckoning, Chopper Pull has definitely been nerfed again and again and again. I did have one more point. Let me see if I can find it. I also have a list of how I would personally adjust the abilities, but I think I'm waiting with that if we're diving into a more free-for-all open topic. For the last point of my turn, I would just say that these abilities, I don't think it's a good idea to give Chopper Pull ID, and I don't think Slayer should get to the Slayer or whatever. It's messing with the game, and abilities can be adjusted if they are deemed overperforming, but I think the split between Destro having Synergy, Order having Superstar Slayer, it kind of makes sense whenever the abilities are in line. That's my finishing thought.
Alright, I got you. Fair point, fair point. Karis, anything you would like to add from your perspective? Because I know you've fought against multiple both classes over the years, and you've seen a lot yourself in your own right.
Like I said, 2 weeks. I'm going to be very brief here because I don't play either a Slayer as a Chopper, which I made that point 2 weeks ago when this came up. But my philosophy on looking at all the class balances all stems from the exact same place. And that is that all classes are overpowered and all classes suck. It depends on a lot on how each individual player manages the tools that they have available to them. Tosh pretty much summed up anything I would want to say. I agree with a lot of the points that he made. And I think when it comes to the issue of Get to the Choppa and Rampage, that those two particular ones sort of offset each other. And I don't much see the need to go messing around with that whole dynamic. I'm not sure that it would accomplish anything. I'm not saying it won't, because again, I'm not the expert on those two classes. I'm just saying, from my opinion is, I don't think anything positive in the long run would come from that, and that's pretty much all I got to say.
Well, appreciate the honesty on it, and that may very well be the case. But that's the whole point of why we're all here today, is to hash it out and throw ideas around. I will now open the floor up to you guys, basically continuing the discussion as far as what would be some things personally you'd like to see. You've presented arguments of for and against what could could be done, but what would you personally suggest as a way to maybe go about trying to address it? And as Tosh said, you might not know a way to address it, but here's a chance for you to put forward an idea. So collectively between you, what do you think would be a good way to try and go about it?
I think what some of the others here mentioned about Rampage, I think if you were going to think about changing it in some way, I don't think a straight up removal wallet is a good idea. I agree with that. I think maybe taking the 20 seconds off it could be a good sort of compromise, where it still has the 10 seconds but doesn't have the 20 seconds of your Furious. So it's more of a quick burst ability to quickly get your channel out, but then it's over, rather than this prolonged thing that you can stretch out and rotate through, dropping your rage to pop Rampage and just cycling through that over and over again. I think
it's only 20 seconds when you're in yellow. Otherwise, it's 10 seconds in red. And most warband players, I'm assuming, say in red, as long as they can.
Well, it depends. Obviously, if you need to pop it straight away, you'll be in red. So say on a keep defense, when Gesture decides to push, you'll generally pop it when you're in red, because you can't predict when they're going to push. But generally, you want to prep your Rampage channel bombs. So you will call, if you're a warband leader, you will call your Slayers to drop their rage, and then so they'll detaunt to drop their rage. They'll build back to yellow. Then they'll use Retribution all at once. Sorry, not Retribution. Rampage all at once. Build back to yellow, and then drop their Retribution channels. And you cycle through that to get the 20.
You wanted it to be shorter cooldown on it, or shorter duration on it, or...
Yeah, so I think compromise could be taking the 20 seconds off. So it's no longer gives you 20 seconds if you pop it in yellow. It's just the 10 seconds if you pop it in yellow or red.
10 seconds, whatever, on the cooldown 30 seconds. Then. Is that your solution, you mean?
The duration of the skill, so the duration of the buff. Yeah.
I mean, you can still have a Swordmaster shortening the cooldown on it, so you don't want to take that away, right?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting changing the cooldown. It's just the duration of the buff.
That would completely negate the whole process of the mechanic of the rage mechanic that the Slayer and the Choppa have, however.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
That would completely negate the whole mechanic.
That's why I also was a bit confused what you wanted to do. But yeah, I think more in the line of other types of nerfing. The cooldown duration time and all that, changing that, I don't really think is the solution with the Chopper and Slayer's race mechanic either. I'm more in favor of what Tosh said earlier. Maybe just have a go through parry. That would be a first really good step. Moving it up in the tree will be another. I just don't see them ever taking away the self heal from the 13-point skill. This is high damage and it's a high self heal. It really depends what they want to do with it, but it could go higher up. It could go up and swap spot with deep wound. That could also upset a lot of stuff. But yeah, I don't really know. That's two other solutions I think are better than changing or messing with a mechanic.
Right. Yeah. I do think that the taking away the it doesn't bypass parry. I think that's also a valid option as well. I think that's not a bad idea.
Master Tanks then can run sword and board, but they can't then sit and complain that it goes through one on because it won't go through their shields, so they can still block every guard damage if they just run sword and board. Then they have the option. They still want to stay two-hand. Well, then they have to take that damage. If they go sword and board, then they can block the guard damage from rampage.
So basically, what I'm hearing, the general gist of me so far, is that it would be okay in line with what Zell told Tosh, which is make it to where it can bypass the parry, is it, Tosh, and not the dodge?
Correct. Bypass the parry, but not bypass the block, and that would then force more tanks to run in a warband build, more tanks to run a sword and board build instead of running a two-handed build. Because right now you can run a two-handed build and almost have no negative consequences that I'm aware of, besides maybe like a hold the line ability. You lose the hold the line and things like that, but other than that, it's not really. There's no real consequence, in my opinion, of running two-handed versus a sword and board. Now, something else that I also I don't want to just interrupt here and just go on this, but keep in mind, Rampage can be removed by 3 classes that Destro has. So now, are we only talking about keep funnels? Because then I understand that it's much harder to strip the Rampage in a keep funnel when you can't find the Slayers. But in an open warband setting, an open field, I'm going to assume that if you're talking pre-made warband versus pre-made warbands, that everyone probably knows who everyone is. They probably have the high targets probably enemy flagged, so they know who the Slayer is, they know who the healer is, they know where they're all at on the map. So they could just easily, in open field, on some level, click the name of the Slayer and say, okay, there goes Blood right there. Click him. Watch. Some sort of a buff timer. Okay, he popped Rampage. Okay, Doc, strip it. Or BG, strip it. Or BO, strip it. So you could easily call that out in a warband setting and almost negate in an open field setting the Rampage system in that regard. Now, keep funnels, I completely understand. It's much harder to do. But open field battles, city fights, there are plenty of warbands over the years that have destroyed Order Slayer heavy groups because they know what to do, they know how to combat it. It's something that can be overcome in an open field warband setting.
I agree.
I agree with everything you're saying. The only thing I would say is that Rampage is not overpowered in open field. Where it creates unfair advantage is only in funnel situations. So that's
correct. So, but then you're talking about nerfing ability for one niche area only, and in today's meta isn't really as much of keep takes. It's more of standing in open field and Zerg fighting, for hours on end, not sitting in funnel situations. So
Do
are
you
we
think
talking?
do you think that's because of Rampage though? If Rampage wasn't being
No, I do not. I think it's because of of many different reasons of wanting to farm kills, farm crests, farm renown, because it's much and with the city changes, this goes down a whole different conversation here. But with the city changes of players not feeling that city matters, then there's no reason to push zones, no reason to push forts, no reason to do things. Just stay in a zone and just fight for a long time, and that's how you're gonna reap the most rewards for your warband. There's no reason to push a fort because more than likely one side's not going to defend it anyway. There's no reason to push a keep because one side's probably not going to defend it anyway. And if a city pops, you're only going to get 4 to 6 instances anyway. So there's a chance that you won't even get a city pop if you're a pre-made warband. So just sit in the zone and just farm kills.
I don't really agree 100% with all that, but I would say that from my opinion, in EU prime time, where you got massive numbers, so like 4 or 5 warbands each side, I think destruction is going to be disincentivized from sieging because Order has an advantage defending with Rampage, and I think if you somehow tweaked that, I don't know the balancing of it, but if you tweaked it, you would potentially encourage more sieging, etc., and not so much just 2 blobs smashing into each other for hours on end.
I would say Destro is decentralized from sieging because Order will sit in a keep for hours upon hours waiting for Destro to siege. So they have engineers, bright wizards, slayers, every class in the keep 30 to 45 minutes before a siege ever starts because Order's waiting for the siege to happen. So that's why, in my opinion, Destro says we're not going to siege because they want us to siege. That's why you see zones where nothing really happens by one side, and you see 3 stars, 4 stars zones happening because no one wants to siege because everyone's waiting for somebody to siege because they want somebody to siege.
I think Bombling, you had something to say?
Yeah, when you guys are done with this topic, I wanted to take it in a little bit different direction.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Bombling.
So from a destruction guild roaming point of view, I wanted to cover a little bit on some of the stuff Tosh talked about. Tosh, you said that if we take that suggestion about Rampage is only bypassing parry, was it? And not block?
Correct.
Yeah. So if that was the case, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but if that was the case, in terms of warband play, you would still have shield tanks on Destro because they have the massive advantage of they have block morale pump. Whenever they're blocking, they pump morale and you get more races, you get more bellows, more morale force, whatever it might be. So they have this advantage, and it's still nice to have a couple of stacks of hold the line in case you're facing all these Shadow Warriors, bloodbrother engineers, or whatever, especially in keep sieges. So Destro warband still definitely runs the shields. It's not only two-handed plastic swords they're waving around.
No, I completely understand that. My point is that it would change up the normal meta of seeing as many two-handed tanks in warbands because they see no point of going sword and board because Rampage will bypass, block and parry anyway. So why even go sword and board? Just go two-hand. That's the mindset of some players. I'm not saying everybody. So if you augmented Rampage to only bypass parry, then there would be a incentive to go sword and board because you could say, well, now I can bypass 50% of the damage they could possibly do to us in a funnel situation. So then we could then have somebody pop a banner. We'll call him Morale 4. We'll throw the banner guy in. He'll punt everybody in to make room for the hole. We'll Morale 4 bomb. We can do hold the line. We're gonna negate, all the block damage. It won't go through, and we can try to do it that way. But again, my count. Go ahead. Sorry.
I do see your logic, and I see where you would come to that conclusion, but it's just not something I recognize from guild warband play, from the guilds I've fought in the past and how they usually operate. Like, shields are the way to go for majority of tanks in warband play on roaming guild knights in EU Prime.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Blood.
Oh, I agree with Bombling. In general, if you're in an organized warband, you're not going to have any two-handers. You like on order, you might be running one two-handed knight for the crit debuff, but in general, you're not running two-handers on your tanks in open RVR organized warbands.
I understand that, and that's why I said earlier that organized warbands have a different mindset. They stack their warband to be most effective. This is more of a mass scale, almost pug thing I'm thinking about here. That it would force, or not force, but it would incentivize more players, not just pre-mades, that if they want to go into a warband to play sword and board, instead of having a lot of two-handed tanks running around. Again, because I'm not an advocate of removing Rampage at all. I'm not an advocate of changing the cooldown, because then you're completely messing with the whole mechanic of what a Slayer is. But I do see the point of augmenting where it doesn't bypass block. And again, we're mostly discussing only funnel situations. Again, when I play, which is anywhere between 6 to 9 hours a day, you can have potentially, if the populations are even, 1 or 2 keep sieges in that whole period. Now, you see a lot of keep sieges when there's AAO on one side. Sure, then they just run through zones. Either side, they'll just run through a zone because there's no opposition. But otherwise, the days of, 15-hour KV, not really normal anymore, but that used to happen a lot more, where you would have zones open for, 5, 6, 8 hours. And
I
you
love
still
those
see,
days.
and you still see even today where sieging is not. In fact, there's warband leaders that if you even mention sieging, they say no, don't ruin the fun, don't siege, don't ruin the fun, don't siege, don't ruin the fun. So there is a incentive for warbands to want to stay in zones and just kill.
So this was one suggestion of how to address or handle Rampage. I have 2 or 3 more if the class is up for debating those also.
That's fine. Go ahead, Bomling. That's what we're here for.
So the one you mentioned, Tosh, was changing Rampage so it's only addressing one of the defense checks and not the other. One I would personally address, and one I like because it's addressing the funnel situation also, is that Rampage is 100% bypass right now. But if you have a chopper standing in front of a Slayer and both of them are popping Morale Run, 100% parry, but the Slayer then pops Rampage, then Rampage as a normal ability is bypassing and being stronger than a Morale ability, and that in my opinion is not good or fair or fun or whatever you want to label it. I don't agree with that. So I would personally, sorry, let me finish this quickly. I would personally say, how about Rampage is 100% of either the bypass you have. So if you have, let's say, 10% from your strength, you pop Rampage, you get 100% of what you have, so you get up to 20%. Or if we're looking at the percentages, you have 100% chance when you pop Rampage, but then the 100% morales are then increased to 200%. So you're still overruling when you pop a morale instead of having an ability that is bypassing.
I would be okay making it so that normal abilities don't bypass morales, but we would have to do that across the board. We would have to do that so that no class can bypass any morale, not just Rampage, because there are numerous abilities that will bypass morales. It's not just Rampage. And the other thing I would say is I don't know, because I don't play Choppa in warbands. I don't do warband play anymore. But as far as I am aware, most Choppas don't run the parry morale. They run the absorb morale in warband play. So the idea of the parry morale being bypassed, I find as a topic of, well, they don't run it anyway, they run absorb. So it's still being, in that regard, negated, and it's being absorbed by their parry morale. By their absorb morale.
I think most choppers run the parry M1.
Are you sure?
But could be wrong. I certainly never ran the absorb one myself.
On the Slayer, I would say most run. Well, everyone. Most did it.
Slayer, you run the
No.
100%.
Yeah, the immunity one. Yeah.
The 5-second one instead of the 7-second parry. But on the
Alright.
chopper, you don't have that option, so you run the 7-second. I think it's parry and dodge, is it?
Yeah, parry and dodge for moral one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean,
one's
but
in the
my main point here is that I understand and I agree with the concept that it shouldn't bypass morale, but I would make that rule across the board to all classes.
Yeah, sure.
That would be my point. You know, you wouldn't have. I mean, now we're talking about complete overhaul of all classes from small scale to warband play. So I would fundamentally agree with the Bombling to do that because I do believe that morales should be the defining ability that should override all things until you get into morales versus morales. But there are a lot of abilities that can just bypass it anyway as well, including chosens and dagger throws and there's a litany of abilities that can do it. But anyway, go ahead.
But that was kind of two suggestions. I first made the suggestion that you
No.
just multiply whatever strike through you have, so you have double of that when you pop rampage. That
Yeah,
could be one way where you address only rampage and not all the morales.
Yeah, and that's something that, again, as many people have said over the time on this podcast, this is a test server, so I would not be against to at least trying it out and testing it and see how it works out. If it doesn't work out, then revert it like they reverted when they removed Rampage originally. So give it 2 weeks, a month, whatever. If it doesn't work, then revert it and try something else. But again, I don't want people to overlook that when you're talking pre-mades versus pre-mades, people are going to be calling out named players for when they do, and they're going to be stripping some of these abilities in open field. So keep that in mind as well.
I can bring a little anecdotally evidence for that because everyone knows that's so much value in those. When we ran Guild Warband on Destro, we would have one chop on each group, and the whole setup was basically around Slayer. Like no other class made us focus so much on what they could do. Like everything was kind of built around facing Slayers. So I would put one chop on each group, and we would coordinate chop faster. So all the tanks would then have no cooldown on their enchantment strip. So I would ask all the black tanks, as I call them, the black orcs and the black guards, every time we had a fight, you guys are responsible of targeting a Slayer, and you're spamming that strip, and you're trying to get rid of all the buffs. Everyone had that buff head set up, so whenever we saw Evil, for example, when he was leading the warband, you see the enemy marker on all the warband leaders. You target the Slayer whenever they have a rampage up. That's like your go-to, your warning sign, because you know it's not coming instantly, that the challenge, the big channel is coming with retribution, but that's like your 5-second warning sign. You
Correct.
see the rampage, and then you start working against that either with positioning, or you try to set up an interrupt on them, or you try to strip it.
Correct. So that's where I start to say, well, some people act like it's a I win button for Order or for Slayers, and it's not. Just like Order says that I win button on Get to the Choppa, it's not an I win button. It's something that can be defended with or against as with organized people. Pugs, yes, but pugs are going to get destroyed by organized people no matter what. Generally speaking, they're going to. They're just going to get run over because they're not communicating. But organized will watch out for it and they'll look for it. And I don't have any special PowerPoint presentations, but if you want to look at easy evidence of Destro being able to handle it, when you look at when cities were introduced back in 2020, Destro went on almost a undefended run of nonstop winning of cities against pre-made order, against Order in general.
I heard that somewhere.
Just destroying. They went on a streak of something like 26 straight city instances, not individuals, but 26 straight cities won in a row. So there is record of Destro being able to handle Slayers and being able to handle them with organization and whatnot, and that's with Rampage and everything else. So it can be done, It can be handled. It's just that people want to cry about whatever ability they want to cry about because it killed them. And these are people that, and the old school terminology of get good just isn't being done anymore.
Yeah, I do think.
I remember what you're talking about because when I first started playing, you talking about what went down in what 2020 was it?
Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, when I first started playing, the first 6 months that I was on the server, Order could not do anything. I watched one city after another just fall, and it wasn't. And there were even pre-mades on Order that tried and would just get stomped. And I was like, okay, something's going on.
Maybe
But
yeah.
I don't want to get onto the discussion of Destro versus Order and things of that nature, but it can be defended against. It's not just an I win button. Is it annoying in funnels? Yes, I agree. It's very hard to defend against in funnels. Is it a deterrent to siege in funnels? Very possibly, maybe. I don't know. I don't do warband play on either side, so I don't really know. But it's been proven that Destro can overmap it. It's been proven they can defend it and defeat it. It's just, it's like Order complains about get to the chopper, endlessly speaking. Well, in my opinion, don't put yourself out of position, and then you're not probably going to get pulled. If you're not paying attention, you're probably going to be okay. But anyway, go ahead. I'm going to get off topic here.
Can I quickly
Get
just
to the
go back to
chopper,
the derail?
Sorry.
And guys,
Get to the chopper.
one second, Blood. 1 second before you go too far, guys. Check that link out, Karis just linked. If you want to see what's being referred to.
Well, let me, if I may have 1 minute just to explain that.
Yeah, go, buddy.
That video I published on April 13, 2020, it was about the very thing that Tosh was just, well, both Tosh and Toth were talking about. The trouble, put it that way, that Order was having trying to win a city at that time. So the video, it's more up for just to sort of reinforce those points, but it is a little bit dated, but I think the points that I made there still hold true about that particular time in the history of the server. And both Toth and Tosh have just sort of reinforced what I said back then. So that's why I put it up. All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Not a problem. Appreciate you posting it.
I think Bombling had a third point he wanted to make.
Well, it's maybe a little derailed because now we're talking a little bit about that era of city sieges, but I kind of
I apologize.
No, I just quickly want to touch on it because I have a strong opinion about this. I strongly disagree that Order couldn't win or Destro couldn't win back then because some of the best players, when they banded together and they played either on Order or Destro, they went undefeated. Like, I'm gonna use the guild Troop here in this example. They queued up, for instance, one, they queued with whatever setup they had on both sides, and they fought against some of the best players, and they won with both Order and Destro. The reason, in my opinion, that Order had such a bad track record was Order had a way worse puck culture, where they had a lot of solo players queuing up, facing semi-organized, looking for group premates that were maybe not synergized or guilds or anything. It was just Destro were putting in more 2-2-2 setups, and Order was just dying to that. That is my opinion on that era, and why Order was losing.
I think you see the same thing these days with a Nightmare City group versus other groups. That they switch sides and they win on both sides. It's totally dependent on who's in the city as to who will win. I don't think it's really class dependent or side dependent, Destro versus Order in any way.
And I completely agree with that. And that's why I said organization is what wins. It's not any individual ability, which is why I guess generally fundamentally against just. Again, I'm okay with maybe adapting Rampage a little bit, but there is plenty of evidence of organized warbands being able to control it and to adapt to both sides. So it's generally unorganized players that are going to complain about either ability on either side.
I agree.
Well, let me clarify a point here. That in that video, or neither in that video or at any other time, did I ever once make the comment that Order could not win cities. It was the propensity of losses and why I thought that was taking place was the main focus of the points that I made back then. But I never said that Order could never win a city. I just wanted to clarify that point.
It's the same reason why I said, and I said this, about a month ago, why I said Order will not win a Land of the Dead until Order organizes. Order has a propensity to this day, unless everybody swaps to Order side, to play how they used to play cities, which is a pug mindset of solo queuing into Land of the Dead, not communicating, not organizing on any level. They just go in and they just want to play it like it's a normal open RVR system, and then you have organized groups on Destro side just running them over, and it's the same type of almost what we had in 2020 in cities. And then we've seen it recently when Order then gets stacked with organized warbands and organized leaders, and communication happens, then the tides turn, and then Destro gets demolished. However, that's also because Destro had no leadership at that Land of the Dead as well. But that's a different topic. That's a completely different topic as well. But history will show that it's organization and communication that are winning these fights, not individual abilities or individual classes, is my main point.
That I would agree with. Even in the 4+ years that I've been on the server, that's something that I've seen bear out time and again, is that the organization will carry the day when it's all said and done, versus somebody with that individual mindset of, oh, it's all about me, I can win the day.
I mean, the whole game is balanced around having a 2-2-2 setup. That's why I ranked as 2-2-2 and one, not 1-3, whatever. The same for like the city instances. When you have a POG instance and there's like 13 engineers and 1 2-handed swordmaster and a DPS archmage, like the game is not balanced around that situation.
Yeah. Well,
correct.
I do have a question for you, gentlemen. Go ahead, Karis.
Never mind.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Say it.
It brings up an ancillary issue when you talk about getting into a city where you may have, like 5 engineers and, oh my god, a 2-hand swordmaster. It's also part of the queuing system, the queue-queuer system, and its default position of stacking a pre-made, a 24 pre-made, in with the pugs, as opposed to stacking 2 pre-mates together. That's been that's been a staple of the queuing system for cities and individual scenarios for a long time. And there is still to this day a post on the forum. I'll try to find it here in a minute to put it up, put a link up, where that was admitted to by one guy on a server who would know, who would, that was intentional. All that was intentional. And one of the lines used in that particular post was, "You can play solo if you want, but you're going to suffer for it." Okay, so it's not all just a question of organization, although that is the largest issue. I agree on all of you that. There's also the ancillary issue of how the queuer pits people together. But
that's more of a modern city queue issue, isn't it? Because if we were talking at the launch of City Sieges back when we had all these like 20 instances or however much, and Order had this big losing spree that people were spreadsheeting how long it lasted and all of that. That was the old city queue, where it was based on the time you queued, how many instances were already going, and at the time of when you queued, and with the other team, the other realm, when they had queued.
The initial queue system was whacked because it allowed for what eventually was taken advantage of, which was the queue dodging. And I remember a very specific night where I was streaming a city, and people were screaming at me in the Twitch log, "Just queue already." course, I wasn't the warband leader, so it wasn't my choice. But that I was not sorry to see that system go, and the timers changed on that.
It definitely had its flaws, and it definitely addressed the main flaw it wanted to address with city queuing, city dodging. Sorry.
I also agree that the game is balanced, as you said, bombing with 2-2-2. But I don't think they really managed to balance between ranged and melee in this game, ever. In any of those situations, it doesn't work all overall game modes. And yeah, I don't think they ever will have a solution for that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having a little bit of imbalance in games by default, because in my mind you want to have it where one side has a inherent advantage over another side in certain environments, and then when that environment changes, the other side will have a inherent advantage over you. So if we're talking that Order has a advantage in funnels, well, okay, well that's offset that maybe Destro has an advantage in open field with their crowd control abilities or AoE knockdowns or pulls, things of that nature. So I think those two things almost cross each other out because they have advantages in different environments, and it depends on how each side chooses to engage each other. So I kind of find that if we're talking about, well, let's change this ability or that ability based upon just this one or two engagements, well, what about the other two engagements where it is now completely negated right off the bat no matter what anyway?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's I don't really know the solution for that, but
there's going to be imbalance in different areas where somebody is going to have an advantage over you. And if we're talking about completely removing any advantages that our opponents have over us, then you're completely removing the whole concept of what, in my opinion, what an MMORPG PvP based game is. Then you're just talking about having a straight up battle royale where you might as well just have one class on each side to sit in a circle and just fight it out, and then see which one can hit buttons faster.
That's exactly what Fixer said many moons ago. Basically, the community wants a giant mosh pit where they can kill each other.
Yeah, and that's not a game that I want to play personally. I want a game. This is one reason why I prefer, and this is, I'm going to get off topic here, and I apologize a little bit, so I apologize. That's why I prefer open RVR solo play, because I like to know that any corner I turn around, I don't know what my opponent, who he or she may be, I don't know what spec he or she may be, and I don't know what class he or she may be. So I am at a disadvantage of not knowing this right off the bat, and I have to try to think about quickly what he or she is trying to do against me and what I can counter against that on the fly. Whereas if this is kind of in a scenario argument, and I don't want to get off topic here, people generally will look at, okay, who's playing, what classes are they, okay, now this is what I'm going to do, and it's kind of already determined in your mind of how you're going to play. So that's why I prefer the open RVR solo environment, because I don't know who I'm fighting against, and I don't know what spec they're going to be, and I don't know who they may be, how they want to play.
I got you.
So I like that randomized, not knowing aspect.
Okay.
That's the most fun aspect of playing the game. What you just said, Tosh. I'm sorry, but that's the going out solo. I've done the same thing for years.
I don't want to make this a solo warband thing. I don't mean to do that.
No, but the solo play. I just want to echo that comment, because I've got a video series called Philosophy, which is nothing but 1v1 fights, random 1v1 fights. And I've said this before, and real quick, I'm going to say it again. To me, that is the most fun aspect of playing a game. going down in the crypts, you know, and finding someone down there when you have no idea who it might be, how they might be spec, whatever, and you fight and you win. That is what I play the game for. All the rest of this stuff is fine and dandy, and you know, war bands can be fun, cities can be fun, blah blah blah. But the most fun aspect to me has always been the small scale stuff.
For me, it's not even about winning. It's about learning. There are several players on the server that I spent a lot of time them helping me learn how to fight against opposing players. You know, there are plenty of docs on the server, witch elves on the server that have taken time to say, hey, you know what? Let's go to the arena, and you know, I'm going to show you what this ability does. I'm going to show you what this looks like. I'm going to show you why I do it, and then you do this, and let's try this out. And I spent a lot of time trying to learn what classes are doing, what the animations look like, so that way I can identify, you know, okay, they're doing this, I need to do this. If I don't do this, I'm probably going to lose this fight. And losing, to me, is not a negative. I take that as a learning experience to, maybe I need to do better. Let me look at what I did wrong. Let's examine what happened, and maybe I'll never beat you. And that's okay, too. Maybe I will never beat you. But it's fun in trying to get better and trying to learn what the opposition's trying to do.
All right. Well, I think you guys have definitely gone over a lot of the topic and have definitely presented good counter arguments and have definitely had some solid debates on it. Now I do have a question for you guys. Are you comfortable with answering some questions from chat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No.
I have one more Rampage counter or adjustment suggestion if people are still interested in that topic.
All right, go
Yes,
ahead, and then we'll open the
good.
floor up. We'll open the floor to people in chat. But go ahead, Bomber.
13 years later, we're still talking about Rampage. Go.
Yes. So we talked a little bit about some of the counterplay to the ability itself. Like you can remove it, you can strip it. I have the suggestion: what if Rampage was always put so it's the first ability to get removed? I don't think it personally addresses the funnel situations that you might sometimes face. I think it would completely make Rampage almost useless in 6 versus 6. But how do people view this suggestion about making it always the first on the list when it's getting removed? So you can no longer mask it with popping your war cries and chopper attack speed and all of this.
I would say that it's unnecessary because I don't think that Rampage needs to be balanced in any scenario other than in a funnel situation, and that's not going to balance that.
Yeah,
You're talking about sieges, like forts and stuff.
Yeah. So that's where it's at its strongest, right?
I think that Bombling's suggestion is interesting, but I think it's a bit. I don't think it's too hard of a nerf. I think, but yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
It would nerf the skill where it's not strong and not do anything to it where it is strong, if that makes sense.
I think all the warbands would, to be honest, learn to not spec it, really. If that's the case. It will instantly get removed by those 3 classes we have mentioned, and if it's always the first thing removed, well then it will be constantly removed. Other than in a Zerg v Zerg situation, of course, where you can't really focus on clearing everything. But other than, yeah.
In an open field situation, it's already a trade-off to use Rampage because you're dropping your rage to use it. So you're trading off that damage bonus.
Yeah, you're giving up a lot of tempo doing it, and it's pretty telegraphed.
Yeah. So I think that further nerfing it in that situation is not necessary. I don't think.
I have a follow-up thing, Jasper. Do you guys think that Rampage, or how it got worse with the AoE cap situation?
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah,
Are you talking about accuracy, Rav?
No. The AoE cap situation. How it affected skill. How do you think that did it get worse after that? Because it feels like after that the discussion of rampage has really ramped up.
I mean,
It's
before the AoE cap increase, you would have player behavior where players would have safety in numbers because tanks
Yeah.
would literally body block with collision, and you could hide behind tanks, and the damage would get spread out between random 9 targets instead of hitting all 24 if people were blobbing up. So it gave the safety in numbers. If it helped rampage, yeah, to some extent probably, but I don't think that's the main cause.
I'm just wondering because this is a thing I heard, so taking it up here.
Alright. Anything else, Bombling?
No, that was my view on AoE cap.
Alright. Well, now that the main guests have finished their end of the discussion, I want to open the floor up to those of you in chat. I know a lot of you have been talking and right alongside the conversation, so now is your chance. Any of you that have questions that you would like to pose to the guests in the Discord, now's your chance to comment on the rampage suggestions for and against. Now, please speak up.
I have an answer to that question. I know Larry as well is a fellow Swede.
Alright, Larry's saying, how would the fellow Slayers feel about reverting Rampage to the 2018 change where it only worked when two-handed? Go ahead, Rav.
Well, you have to look at it from a warband perspective. Two-hand spec for Slayer and Chopper is not a good spec for either of those classes, to be honest. It's not AoE, so warbands don't want them to go two-hand. There's no